The first time Elena Martinez saw him, he was holding a $12,000 camera like it was a brick. She'd been setting up her equipment on the ridge overlooking Silver Lake, preparing for her monthly moon photography workshop, when a black SUV pulled into the gravel parking area. The door opened, and out stepped a man who looked like he'd walked straight out of a boardroom and accidentally wandered into the wilderness. Dark jeans that probably cost more than her rent, a charcoal sweater that fit him perfectly, and expensive leather boots that had clearly never seen a hiking trail before tonight. Elena watched as he retrieved a massive camera bag from the back seat, handling it with the kind of careful uncertainty that told her everything she needed to know. He was new at this, very new. "You here for the workshop?" she called out, though she already knew the answer. Her class tonight had 8 registered participants, and 7 were already gathered around her, adjusting tripods and chattering excitedly about the supermoon expected to rise in 40 minutes. The man looked up, and even in the fading twilight, Elena noticed his eyes. Dark, intense, the kind that seemed to take in everything at once. He was handsome in that polished, almost intimidating way that made her immediately assume he was probably used to getting whatever he wanted. "Yes," he said, walking toward the group with confident strides that somehow still seemed out of place on the uneven terrain. "Sorry I'm late. Meeting ran over." Of course it did. Elena smiled politely and gestured for him to join the semicircle. "No problem, we haven't started yet. I'm Elena Martinez. Welcome to Advanced Moon Photography Techniques. Dominic Cross." He extended his hand, and when she shook it, his grip was firm and warm. "Though I should probably admit I'm not sure I qualify for the advanced part." "The beginner class was full," Elena said, pulling her hand back and trying to ignore the way her pulse had picked up slightly. "But don't worry. I'll make sure everyone gets personal attention. Let's see what you're working with." Dominic set his bag down and carefully extracted his camera. Elena's eyebrows rose. It was a top-of-the-line Nikon, the kind of equipment she dreamed about owning someday, with a lens that probably cost as much as her used Honda Civic. "That's a beautiful camera," she said carefully. "How long have you been shooting?" 2 weeks. He had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "The guy at the store said this was the best." "It is," Elena confirmed, trying not to feel envious. "But it's like buying a Ferrari when you just got your driver's license. You've got the tools, now you need the skills to match." She softened her words with a smile. "Good news is, you're in the right place to learn." As the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky shifted from orange to deep purple, Elena began her lesson. She'd been teaching moon photography for 3 years now, ever since she'd left her suffocating job at a corporate photography studio to pursue the kind of work that actually made her soul sing. The pay was unpredictable, and her bank account was perpetually anxious, but standing on this ridge with the wind in her hair and the promise of celestial beauty overhead made every sacrifice worth it. "The moon moves faster than you think," she explained, moving between her students to check their settings. "You've got maybe 2 or 3 seconds before you need to refocus. Shutter speed is critical. Too slow and you'll get motion blur. Too fast and you won't capture enough light." She made her way to Dominic, who was frowning at his camera's display screen with the focused intensity of someone used to mastering things quickly. His settings were completely wrong, but his posture told her he'd figure it out through sheer determination if necessary. "May I?" Elena gestured to his camera, and he handed it over immediately. "I watched about 15 YouTube videos," he admitted. "Apparently that's not the same as actually knowing what I'm doing." Elena laughed, a genuine sound that surprised her. YouTube is great, but there's no substitute for practice. Okay, first problem. Your ISO is way too high. You're going to get noise like crazy. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls, adjusting settings while explaining each change. Aperture needs to come down. You want sharp detail, especially with a moon this bright. What about exposure? Dominic asked, leaning closer to watch what she was doing. He smelled like expensive cologne and something else, something warm and cedar-like that made her very aware of how close he was standing. We'll bracket our exposures, Elena said, stepping back slightly and handing him the camera. Take several shots at different settings. The moon is brighter than you think. It's being hit by direct sunlight, remember. A lot of beginners overexpose and end up with a white blob instead of detail. White blob, got it. Avoid that. There was humor in his voice, self-deprecating in a way that made him seem less intimidating. The moon began to rise, huge and golden on the horizon, and the group fell into reverent silence. This was Elena's favorite moment, the collective intake of breath when the celestial body first appeared, ancient and beautiful and utterly indifferent to the humans pointing cameras at it. Okay, everyone start shooting, Elena called out softly. Remember what we discussed. Check your focus between shots. She moved among her students, offering quiet guidance and encouragement. When she reached Dominic again, he was completely absorbed in his work, eye pressed to the viewfinder, fingers adjusting the focus ring with increasing confidence. "How's it looking?" she asked. He pulled back and checked his screen, then held the camera out to her. Elena leaned in to look, and her breath caught. The shot was stunning. He'd captured the moon with perfect clarity, every crater visible. The exposure balanced beautifully to show both the bright surface and the subtle gradations of light along the edges. "This is incredible," she said, genuine admiration in her voice, "especially for someone who started 2 weeks ago." "Beginner's luck," Dominic said, but she could see the pleasure in his expression. "That's not luck. That's a good eye. That's instinct." Elena straightened up and smiled at him. "You might actually be a natural at this." For the next hour, the group worked in companionable near silence. The click of shutters and occasional whispered comment, the only sounds besides the wind rustling through the scrub grass. Elena took her own shots between helping her students, losing herself in the meditative rhythm of focus, frame, shoot, adjust, repeat. She was reviewing her latest image when she felt someone watching her. She looked up to find Dominic had turned his camera in her direction instead of the sky. Heat flooded her cheeks. "What are you doing?" she asked, trying to sound professional rather than flustered. "Practicing," he said simply. "You said to shoot what interests me." "I meant the moon." "You're more interesting than the moon." He lowered the camera, and even in the darkness, she could see his slight smile. "And constantly moving, which you said was good for practicing focus." Elena should have shut it down. She was the instructor. This was her business. She needed to maintain professional boundaries. But something about the way he said it, straightforward and honest without being creepy or pushy, made her words come out softer than intended. "I'm sure you didn't pay $150 to take pictures of the teacher." "Best 150 I've spent in a while," Dominic said, then turned his camera back to the sky before she could formulate a response. When the workshop ended and her students began packing up their equipment, several came over to thank her and show off their favorite shots of the night. Elena gave each person her full attention, offering praise and suggestions for improvement, making notes about who might be interested in her upcoming advanced workshop series. Dominic hung back, taking his time breaking down his gear with the careful precision of someone who'd watched instruction videos on that too. When the others had driven away and it was just the two of them left on the ridge, he finally approached her. "Thank you," he said. "That was exactly what I needed. I'm glad." Elena secured her own camera bag and collapsed her tripod with practiced efficiency. "You really do have talent. If you keep practicing, you could get seriously good at this." "Would you be willing to do private lessons?" The question caught her off guard. She looked up at him, trying to read his expression in the moonlight. "I don't usually do one-on-one instruction." "I'd pay triple your normal rate." "Money." "Of course." Elena felt something deflate in her chest, which was ridiculous because obviously this was a business transaction. What did she think? That he was asking to spend time with her because he liked her? She was wearing cargo pants with muddy knees and a fleece jacket that had seen better days. Men who looked like Dominic Cross did not pursue women who looked like they'd been hiking. But triple her normal rate would mean she could finally get her camera sensor cleaned professionally. And maybe, possibly, afford that new lens adapter she'd been eyeing for months. "Okay," she heard herself say. "When did you want to schedule something?" "Tomorrow night," Elena blinked. "That's fast." "I'm only in town for 3 more weeks," Dominic explained. "Work project. I'm trying to make the most of it." "What do you do?" Elena asked, though she'd already guessed he was something corporate, something that required expensive watches and late meetings. "I run a company." He said it casually, like it was no big deal. "We're in the middle of acquiring a manufacturing plant here in Colorado, so I've been going back and forth between here and New York for the past month." A company, not just working for one. Running one. Elena revised her estimate of his tax bracket upward significantly. "Must be a big company if acquisitions take you across the country." "Big enough," Dominic said with a shrug. "It's fine. Keeps me busy. But it's also why I picked up photography. My sister said I needed a hobby before I burned out completely." He smiled, and there was something boyish about it that made him seem suddenly younger, more approachable. She suggested painting or pottery. "I thought standing outside under the moon sounded better than sitting in a studio with a bunch of strangers discussing their feelings about clay." Elena laughed despite herself. "And photography doesn't require discussing feelings." "Exactly. Just me, a camera, and something beautiful to look at." His eyes lingered on her for just a moment too long to be casual. "So, tomorrow night." "Sure," Elena said, mentally rearranging her schedule. "Same time, same place." "Perfect." She watched him walk back to his SUV, moving with that same confident grace that seemed at odds with the wilderness setting. His taillights disappeared down the winding road, and Elena stood alone on the ridge with the moon overhead, and a strange fluttering in her chest that she absolutely refused to name. The next evening, Elena arrived early and found Dominic already there, leaning against his vehicle with his camera bag at his feet. He traded the expensive sweater for a fitted black thermal shirt that showed off broad shoulders and strong arms. She tried very hard not to notice. "Eager student," she commented, climbing out of her Civic with her own gear. "Figured I'd practice setting up while I waited, see if I could remember everything from yesterday." They hiked up to the ridge together, and Elena found herself relaxing into easy conversation. Dominic asked questions about her background, seeming genuinely interested when she talked about growing up in Denver, about studying art and photography at a state school because it was all she could afford, about the terror and exhilaration of quitting her stable job to chase this uncertain dream. "No regrets," he asked as they reached their spot and began setting up tripods. Every day, Elena admitted, and also never. It's complicated. The best things usually are. She glanced at him curiously. Is that your philosophy on business too? Business is rarely complicated if you're doing it right, Dominic said. It's just numbers and logistics and people. You figure out what everyone wants and find a way to give it to them while getting what you want. Simple. Sounds cold. It's practical. He adjusted his tripod height, copying the stance she'd set for her own. But also why I needed a hobby. Turns out humans need more than spreadsheets and acquisition strategies to feel alive. Shocking revelation, Elena teased. They worked together as the light faded and the moon rose, this time a day past full but still stunning. Elena showed him advanced focusing techniques, explaining hyperfocal distance, and how to layer multiple exposures for dynamic range. Dominic absorbed everything like a sponge, asking smart questions that showed he was thinking beyond just the technical aspects to the artistic choices behind them. Why moon photography specifically? He asked during a break, both of them reviewing their shots. There are a lot of things to photograph. Elena considered the question, wanting to give him an honest answer. Because the moon is constant but always changing. Same object, different light, different context, infinite ways to capture it. And because when I'm out here shooting, all the noise in my head goes quiet. It's just me and this ancient thing that's been hanging in the sky since before humans existed. It puts everything in perspective. Dominic was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. I get that, the perspective part. I've spent the last 15 years building my company, and somewhere along the way I stopped noticing anything except the next goal, the next quarter, the next acquisition. Then I turned 35 last month and realized I couldn't remember the last time I actually looked at the sky. 35 isn't old, Elena said. Feels old when you've spent every moment working. He met her eyes. Feels older when you realize you can't remember the last time you had a conversation with someone who didn't want something from you. There was a vulnerability in his words that surprised her. This wasn't the confident billionaire. This was just a man who'd lost himself somewhere in his own success. What about friends? Elena asked gently. Family. Sister's great, but she's got her own life. Parents are retired in Florida, happy as clams. Friends, he shrugged. Hard to tell who's a real friend when you have money. Everyone wants an investment or a connection or a favor. Gets exhausting. That sounds lonely. It is. Simple, honest, no self-pity, just fact. Elena felt her defenses, which she'd carefully maintained since meeting him, start to crack. Well, good news. I don't want an investment or a connection or a favor. I just want to teach you how to take stunning moon pictures and charge you an exorbitant amount of money for the privilege. Dominic laughed, a real laugh that transformed his entire face. See, that's refreshing. Honest mercenary motivation, I can respect that. They shot until the moon was high overhead, and then Elena taught him about using foreground elements to create context and drama. She showed him how to frame the moon with tree branches, how to use silhouettes of rocks and hills to add depth, how to think about composition beyond just pointing at the bright thing in the sky. You're a good teacher, Dominic said as they were packing up. Patient, clear, and you actually love this, which makes a difference. Thanks. Elena felt warmth spread through her chest at the compliment. You're a good student, attentive, quick learner, not afraid to ask questions. Valuable skills for a CEO, he said with a slight smile. Are you really a CEO? The question popped out before Elena could stop it. Sorry, that's rude. I just mean you don't seem like an arrogant corporate jerk. I was going to say uptight, but sure, let's go with that. Dominic grinned. I can be both when necessary, but yeah, I am. Cross Industries. We do manufacturing, mostly specialized components for aerospace and medical equipment. Started it in my garage 10 years ago with a partner who's smarter than me and a lot of credit card debt. Now we have 4 factories and about 3,000 employees. Elena tried to wrap her head around that. 3,000 people depending on his decisions. The kind of wealth and power that existed in a completely different universe from her own life of scraping together rent and hoping her car didn't need repairs. That's incredible, she said finally. Intimidating, but incredible. It's just what I know how to do, Dominic said. Same as you know how to do this. He gestured at the cameras and the night sky. Everyone's good at something. I'm good at building businesses. You're good at capturing beauty. They stood there in the moonlight, and Elena felt the weight of something shifting between them. This wasn't just teacher and student. This wasn't just a business transaction. This was 2 people who'd somehow stumbled into genuine connection, and she had no idea what to do with that. Same time tomorrow, Dominic asked softly. Elena knew she should say no. Knew she was treading into dangerous territory, developing feelings for a man who lived in New York and ran billion-dollar companies, while she could barely afford her student loan payments. But the word that came out was, yes. Over the next week, their nightly sessions became the highlight of Elena's days. She found herself thinking about Dominic during her morning coffee, wondering what he was doing in whatever meetings consumed his daylight hours. She started putting on mascara before their sessions, which she absolutely refused to examine too closely. Dominic's skills improved rapidly, his natural eye combining with technical knowledge to produce shots that genuinely impressed her. But more than that, they talked about everything. He told her about growing up middle class in Ohio, about his parents who'd sacrificed to send him to business school, about the terror and thrill of starting his own company. She told him about her mother who'd passed away when Elena was 20, about her brother serving in the military overseas, about her fear that she'd made a terrible mistake leaving stable employment to chase art. You didn't make a mistake, Dominic said firmly on their 5th night together. They'd hiked to a different location, a rocky outcrop that gave them a view of the moon rising behind distant mountains. You're doing what makes you come alive. That's never a mistake. Easy to say when you're successful, Elena pointed out. I'm successful at business. Jury's still out on whether I'm successful at being human. He adjusted his camera settings without looking, muscle memory already forming. You, though, you're successful at both. You've built something real, something that matters to people, and you haven't lost yourself doing it. I'm barely making rent, Elena said with a laugh. Not sure that counts as success. Money isn't the only metric. Dominic looked at her seriously. You're happy. That's worth more than anything in my bank account. Spoken like someone with a very large bank account. Fair point. He smiled, but still true. On their 8th night together, storm clouds rolled in earlier than predicted, obscuring the moon before they could get any decent shots. They stood on the ridge watching lightning flicker in the distance, the air electric with coming rain. We should head back, Elena said reluctantly. Going to get ugly fast. Wait. Dominic raised his camera, but instead of pointing it at the sky, he turned it toward her. Let me try something. Dominic, Elena protested, but he was already adjusting settings, using the pre-storm light and distant lightning to create dramatic illumination. Trust me, he said. Just look natural." "I don't know how to look natural when someone's pointing a camera at me." But she stood still, letting him shoot, feeling self-conscious and also strangely thrilled. The first drops of rain began to fall, fat and cold. Dominic lowered his camera and grabbed her hand. "Run." They raced down the trail together, laughing like teenagers, getting absolutely soaked before reaching their vehicles. Elena's hair was plastered to her face, and Dominic's expensive thermal shirt was dripping water, and neither of them cared. "That was stupid," Elena gasped, breathless from running and laughing. "That was perfect," Dominic countered. He was still holding her hand, she realized. His thumb brushed across her knuckles, sending sparks up her arm. "Elena, Thunder cracked overhead, loud enough to make them both jump. The moment broke and Dominic released her hand, stepping back with what looked like regret. "You should get home," he said. "Get dry." "Yeah, you too." Elena fumbled with her car keys, hands shaking from cold and adrenaline and something else entirely. "Tomorrow." "Tomorrow," Dominic confirmed. Elena drove home with the heat blasting and her heart racing, knowing with absolute certainty that she was falling for him. Knowing with equal certainty that it was probably going to break her heart. The next morning, Elena woke to a text from an unknown number. "Check your email." She grabbed her laptop and opened her inbox, finding a message from Dominic with 3 photo attachments. She clicked the first one and her breath caught. It was her, standing on the ridge with storm clouds behind her and wild hair whipping around her face. The lightning in the distance provided dramatic backlighting, and her expression was caught mid-laugh, pure joy radiating from the image. It was beautiful in a way that made her throat tight. The second photo showed her in profile, looking out at the approaching storm with an expression of calm focus. The third captured her glancing back at the camera, surprise and delight and something more intimate in her eyes. She called him immediately. "Dominic, you got them." His voice was warm even through the phone. "What do you think?" "I think you're dangerous with that camera." Elena stared at the photos, seeing herself the way he apparently saw her. Beautiful. Confident, interesting. "These are incredible." "You're incredible," he said simply. "The camera just captures what's there." Elena's pulse jumped. "You can't say things like that." "Why not?" "Because you're leaving in less than 2 weeks. Because we're from completely different worlds. Because this is a terrible idea." She said it all in a rush, needing to name the obstacles between them before her heart got any more involved. Dominic was quiet for a long moment. "What if I don't want it to be just 2 weeks?" "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since the moment I saw you on that ridge. I'm saying every meeting I sit through, I'm mentally calculating how many hours until I can see you again. I'm saying that for the first time in 15 years, I'm distracted from work and I don't even care." He paused. "I'm saying I know it's complicated and probably crazy, but I want to see where this goes." Elena sat down on her bed, emotions swirling. "I want that too," she admitted, "but I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of getting hurt. Of not being enough. Of you realizing I'm just a struggling photographer who drives a 10-year-old Honda and can't afford the kind of life you're used to." "Elena." His voice was firm. "I don't care about any of that, and if you think I'm looking for someone who fits my lifestyle, you haven't been paying attention. I'm drowning in that lifestyle. You're the first real thing I've found in years." "This is crazy," Elena whispered. "Probably," Dominic agreed. "Is that a no?" She thought about the past week and a half. About conversations under the stars and shared laughter, and the way her whole body came alive when he was near. About the photos on her screen that showed her the truth he'd been trying to tell her. He saw her. Really saw her. Not her bank account or her connections or what she could do for him. Just her. "It's not a no," she said finally. She could hear his smile through the phone. "Can I take you to dinner? Actual dinner, not standing on a ridge eating protein bars between shots." "That depends." "Are you going to take me somewhere ridiculously expensive where I don't know which fork to use?" "I was thinking pizza and beer at that place near your apartment." "Your neighbor mentioned it's good when I asked for recommendations." Elena laughed, warmth flooding through her. "You asked my neighbor for restaurant recommendations." "I might have done some reconnaissance to figure out what you'd actually enjoy versus what would impress you." He sounded slightly embarrassed. "Is that weird?" "It's perfect," Elena said softly. "Tonight? I'll pick you up at 7. Elena spent the rest of the day oscillating between excitement and terror. She changed outfits 4 times before settling on dark jeans and a soft blue sweater that her friend insisted brought out her eyes. She actually styled her hair instead of just pulling it into her usual ponytail. She put on makeup and then worried she looked like she was trying too hard and wiped half of it off. When her doorbell rang at exactly 7, she took a deep breath and opened it. Dominic stood there in jeans and a gray Henley, looking somehow more attractive than when he wore expensive business clothes. His eyes widened when he saw her. "You look beautiful." "You clean up nice yourself," Elena managed, trying to calm her racing heart. Dinner was easy in a way she hadn't expected. They sat in a corner booth at the pizza place, sharing a large pepperoni and arguing playfully about whether pineapple belonged on pizza. Dominic told embarrassing stories about his early business failures, and Elena shared tales of photography disasters and awkward client interactions. They talked and laughed until the restaurant was closing and the staff was pointedly stacking chairs. "Sorry," Elena said to their patient server as they finally stood to leave. "Lost track of time." Outside, the night air was cool and crisp, the stars brilliant overhead. Dominic took her hand as they walked, the gesture feeling both momentous and completely natural. "I don't want this night to end," he said quietly. "Me either." They ended up back at the ridge because of course they did. Dominic retrieved his camera from the SUV, and they stood together looking up at the sky, not even pretending to take photos, just being. "Can I kiss you?" Dominic asked, turning to face her. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. "I thought you'd never ask." He cupped her face in his hands, gentle and sure, and kissed her like she was precious, like she was everything. Elena melted into him, hands fisting in his shirt, the world narrowing down to just this moment, this man, this perfect rightness of finally letting herself want something and having it want her back. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dominic rested his forehead against hers. "I'm in trouble here." "Why?" "Because I'm completely falling for you, and I have no idea how to make this work with my life in New York and yours here." Elena pulled back slightly to meet his eyes. "So figure it out. You're supposedly good at solving complicated problems, Mr. CEO. This feels more important than any business problem I've ever tackled." "It is," Elena agreed, "so don't screw it up." He laughed and kissed her again, softer this time, sweet and full of promise. Over the next 10 days they existed in a bubble of new relationship bliss. Dominic rearranged his meeting schedule to spend more time with her. Elena brought him to her favorite local spots, the taco truck with the best burritos in Colorado, the hidden hiking trail that led to a waterfall, the used bookstore where the owner's cat judged customers from his perch on the counter. He met her friends over drinks at a dive bar, charming them with self-deprecating humor and genuine interest in their lives. She learned that he was unfairly good at pool despite claiming he never played, that he sang off-key to classic rock in the car, that he was ticklish behind his left knee. They took moon photos together every clear night, but increasingly the camera became an excuse rather than the purpose. They were building something real, something that grew stronger with each shared confidence and discovered compatibility. Dominic told her about his company in more detail, about the acquisition that had brought him to Colorado and his plans to expand manufacturing in the American market. Elena listened and asked questions, trying to understand the world he inhabited, the pressures and decisions that shaped his days. "The acquisition closes next week," he said one evening as they sat on her apartment balcony sharing a bottle of wine. "I'll need to go back to New York to finalize everything." Elena's stomach dropped even though she'd known this was coming. For how long? At least a month, maybe two. There's a lot to coordinate. He set down his wine and took her hand. "Come with me." "What?" "Come to New York. Stay with me. I know it's fast, but I don't want to do long distance if we don't have to." His eyes were earnest, hopeful. "You can work from anywhere, right?" "Teach workshops there, do freelance shoots. We could make it work." Elena's mind raced. Leave Colorado, the place she'd lived her entire life, her established client base, her network, her home. "Dominic, I can't just uproot my entire life." "Why not?" He wasn't being dismissive, she realized. He genuinely didn't understand the obstacle. "I'm not asking you to give anything up. Just shift location for a while, see if we work outside of our bubble." "It's not that simple. I have a lease, clients, commitments." "Break the lease, I'll cover it. Bring your clients with you remotely or find new ones in a city with 10 times the market. As for commitments, we'll work around them." He squeezed her hand. "I'm not trying to pressure you. I just don't want to lose this, lose us." "I need to think about it," Elena said, feeling overwhelmed. "Of course." Dominic kissed her forehead. "Take all the time you need. Just know that I'm serious about making this work, whatever that looks like." After he left that night, Elena lay awake staring at her ceiling, mind spinning. The logical part of her brain screamed that this was too much too fast, that she barely knew him, that rearranging her life for a man was foolish and risky. But her heart argued back with the memory of his laugh, the way he looked at her like she hung the moon they'd spent so many nights photographing, the feeling of rightness when they were together. She called her best friend Maya at midnight. "This better be an emergency," Maya groaned. "Dominic asked me to move to New York with him." Sudden silence then. "I'm awake. Talk." Elena poured out everything, her fears and hopes tangling together. Maya listened without interrupting, which was how Elena knew she was taking this seriously. "Okay," Maya said when Elena finally ran out of words. "Here's what I think. Forget the logistics for a minute, forget the practical concerns. If those didn't exist, what would you want to do?" "Go with him," Elena admitted immediately. "But that's the heart talking, not the head." "The heart isn't stupid, babe. Sometimes it knows things before the head catches up." Maya paused. "Look, I'm not saying throw caution to the wind, but I've seen you with him. I've seen how happy you are. And this might surprise you, but I actually liked him when we met. He seems solid. Real. Not like he's playing games. But what if it doesn't work out? What if I give up everything and 6 months from now he realizes I don't fit in his world? Then you come home and rebuild. You're tough. You've done it before." Maya's voice softened. "But what if it does work out? What if you spend the rest of your life wondering what could have been because you were too scared to try?" After they hung up, Elena opened her laptop and researched photography markets in New York. Workshops, freelance opportunities, potential teaching gigs at community centers and colleges. The market was robust, actually more vibrant than Colorado in many ways. She could probably build a stronger business there if she worked at it. She thought about the past few weeks with Dominic. How easy it was to be with him. How he supported her work instead of competing with it. How he'd already changed his life in small ways to accommodate her, rearranging meetings and clearing time in his schedule without complaint or fanfare. Maybe Maya was right. Maybe sometimes you had to trust your heart and take the leap. The next evening, when Dominic arrived for their nightly session, Elena met him at the door with her decision made. "I'll come to New York," she said before he could even say hello, his face transformed, joy lighting his features. Yeah, but I have conditions." "Name them." "I need to keep my apartment here for at least 6 months. Safety net." He nodded immediately. "I need you to understand that my career matters. I'm not just tagging along as arm candy. I would never assume otherwise. And we take this seriously. I'm not uprooting my life for a fling. If we're doing this, we're really doing this. Building something real." Dominic stepped forward and framed her face with his hands. "Elena, I have never been more serious about anything in my life. I want everything with you. The real, the messy, the complicated. All of it." He kissed her then, deep and claiming, and Elena felt the last of her reservations melt away. This was crazy and impulsive and completely unlike her usual careful approach to life. It was also absolutely right. "When do we leave?" she asked when they came up for air. 3 days, can you be ready?" "I'll make it work." The next 3 days were a whirlwind of packing, notifications, and arrangements. Elena contacted her clients to explain the situation, surprised by how supportive most were. Several even asked if she'd be offering online workshops they could join remotely. She arranged to ship her photography equipment and most important belongings, packing 2 large suitcases with immediate necessities. Her landlord was disappointed but understanding, agreeing to keep the apartment at her current rate since she was paid up 6 months in advance anyway. Maya helped her pack while plying her with wine and making her promise to video chat at least twice a week. "I can't believe you're actually doing this," Maya said, carefully wrapping Elena's favorite camera in bubble wrap. "Me either," Elena admitted, "but it feels right. Terrifying, but right." The night before leaving, Elena and Dominic drove out to their ridge one last time. The moon was waning, no longer full and dramatic but still beautiful in its way. They stood together in comfortable silence, cameras temporarily forgotten. "Thank you," Dominic said quietly. "For what?" "For taking a chance on me, on us." He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "I know you're giving up a lot." "I'm gaining a lot too," Elena pointed out. "New city, new opportunities, and a man who looks at me like I'm his favorite view." "You are," he kissed the top of her head, "better than any moon." They flew to New York first class, which was a new experience for Elena. She tried not to gawk at the spacious seats and actual meal service, but Dominic seemed amused by her wonder. "Get used to it," he said, squeezing her hand. "This is how we travel." His apartment when they arrived was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, sleek modern furniture, a kitchen that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Elena felt simultaneously impressed and intimidated. "It's beautiful," she said, setting down her suitcase. "It's sterile," Dominic corrected. "I hired a decorator because I had no idea what I was doing. It's never really felt like home." He pulled her close. "Maybe you can help with that." Over the next few weeks, Elena began building a life in New York. She set up a small studio space in Dominic's guest room, researching locations for moon photography around the city. She reached out to community centers about teaching workshops and was surprised by the enthusiastic response. But she also struggled with moments of doubt. Dominic's world was so different from anything she'd known. Business dinners, where people casually discussed million-dollar deals. Charity galas where her nicest dress looked shabby next to everyone else's designer gowns. Friends who worked in finance and tech, whose conversation sometimes left her feeling lost and inadequate. Dominic noticed her discomfort at a particularly formal dinner party about 3 weeks in. They were at the home of one of his business partners, surrounded by people discussing investments and market trends, and Elena had been mostly silent all evening. "You okay?" he murmured during a moment when they were briefly alone. "Fine," Elena lied, "just tired." His eyes searched her face. "We're leaving." "What?" "No, we can't just." But Dominic was already making their excuses, thanking their hosts with the smooth social grace of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Within 10 minutes they were in his car heading home. "You didn't have to do that," Elena said quietly. "Yes, I did." He reached over and took her hand. "Talk to me. What's wrong?" Elena struggled to find the words. I don't fit here. These people, this world, it's not mine. I don't know how to talk about portfolios and acquisitions. I can barely afford to buy the clothes to look presentable at these events." Dominic pulled the car over, parking along a side street, and turned to face her fully. "Listen to me. You don't need to fit into that world. I barely fit into that world, and I built half of it. Those people are business associates, not friends. They're not who I want to spend my time with." "Then why do you?" "Because it's part of the job, but it's not my life." He cupped her cheek. "You're my life. You and our nights chasing the moon and lazy Sunday mornings and real conversations about things that actually matter. The rest is just noise. But it's your noise. I don't want to be the girlfriend who holds you back from your responsibilities." "You're not holding me back. You're keeping me human." Dominic's voice was intense. "Before you, I was that guy at the party tonight. Work consumed everything. I didn't know any other way to be. You showed me there's more to life than the next deal, the next success. Don't ask me to go back to being that person." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm scared I'm not enough." "That eventually you'll realize you could have someone who belongs in that world, who can be an asset to your career instead of a liability." "Elena Martinez, you are the most valuable thing in my life, and you have nothing to do with my career. That's precisely the point." He kissed her softly. "And if you think I want some corporate clone who can discuss market trends over cocktails, instead of a brilliant, passionate artist who makes me see beauty in everything, you really haven't been paying attention." "I love you," Elena blurted out, the words escaping before she could stop them. "I know it's fast and maybe too soon to say, but I do. I love you." Dominic's smile was radiant. "It's not too soon. And I love you too. Have loved you since that first night when you adjusted my camera settings and looked at me like I was both hopeless and worth teaching anyway." They kissed in the parked car like teenagers, and when they finally made it back to the apartment, they stumbled through the door wrapped around each other, leaving a trail of discarded clothes on the way to the bedroom. Later, lying tangled together in the dark, Dominic traced lazy patterns on Elena's bare shoulder. "Move in with me, officially. Not just staying here temporarily, make this home." "I thought I already did move in." "You know what I mean. Give up your Colorado apartment, commit to building a life here with me." Elena thought about it for only a moment before answering. Okay. Yeah. She propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. I love you, I want this. I want us. And I'm tired of keeping one foot out the door just in case. Dominic pulled her down for another kiss, deep and claiming, best decision you'll ever make. Confident, aren't you? About you, always. The next few months were about settling in and building their life together. Elena officially gave up her Colorado apartment, shipping the rest of her belongings to New York. She established herself in the city's photography scene, teaching workshops that quickly gained popularity. Her unique approach and genuine passion attracted students, and word of mouth brought steady business. Dominic made changes too. He hired a president to handle day-to-day operations at Cross Industries, stepping back to a more strategic role that gave him better work-life balance. He started coming home at reasonable hours, spending weekends actually resting instead of working. His sister joked that Elena had performed a miracle, transforming her workaholic brother into someone who occasionally remembered to relax. They explored the city together, finding their own spots. A rooftop in Brooklyn that gave them perfect moon views. A small Italian restaurant where the owner learned their regular order. A bookstore in the village where they spent Saturday afternoons browsing separate sections before comparing finds over coffee. Elena met Dominic's parents when they visited for Thanksgiving, nervous about making a good impression. But they were warm and welcoming, clearly delighted to see their son happy and balanced in a way he apparently hadn't been in years. "You're good for him," his mother said while they were cooking together. Dominic and his father banished to watch football in the other room. "He looks at you like you're the answer to questions he didn't know he was asking." "He's good for me too," Elena said softly. "Better than I knew I needed." 6 months into living together, Dominic came home early from work with suspicious excitement in his eyes. "Pack a bag, we're going somewhere." "Where?" "It's a surprise. Casual clothes." "Warm jacket. Be ready in an hour." Elena learned quickly that arguing with Dominic when he had that particular expression was pointless. She packed quickly, curious and excited, and they drove out of the city as sunset painted the sky gold and pink. 2 hours later, they pulled up to a small cabin in the Catskills, nestled among trees with a clear view of the sky. "What is this?" Elena asked as Dominic grabbed their bags. "Ours, if you want it." He unlocked the door and gestured for her to enter. "I bought it last month. Thought we needed a place to escape, somewhere we could chase the moon without dodging city lights." The cabin was beautiful, rustic, but updated with modern amenities. Large windows, a cozy fireplace, and best of all, a deck perfect for setting up photography equipment. "Dominic, this is incredible." Elena spun to face him. "But you can't just buy a cabin without discussing it." "I can if it's a gift." He set down the bags and pulled her close. "I wanted to give you something meaningful. Something that honors what brought us together." Elena felt her eyes well up. "You're too much sometimes. You love it though." "I do," she kissed him, "and I love you." They spent the weekend at the cabin, shooting the moon and making love and talking about the future. Dominic mentioned marriage carefully, testing the waters, and Elena didn't shy away from the conversation. They talked about timelines and what they both wanted, discovering their visions aligned more than either had dared hope. "I want kids eventually," Elena admitted as they lay on the deck looking up at the stars. "Not right away, but someday." "Me too." Dominic laced his fingers through hers. "How many?" "2, maybe 3. You?" "However many you want to give me," he rolled toward her. I want everything with you, Elena, the whole messy, beautiful, complicated life. That's a lot of pressure, she teased. You can handle it. You handled me, didn't you? 3 months later, on a crystalline February night back at the Ridge in Colorado, where they'd first met, Dominic got down on one knee. They'd flown back for a visit, and Elena had been surprised when he insisted on driving to their old spot despite the cold. "Elena Martinez," he said, holding out a ring that caught the moonlight, "you taught me to see beauty, to slow down, to remember that life is more than work and achievement. You taught me how to love without holding back. Will you marry me?" "Yes," Elena said through happy tears. "Yes, absolutely yes." He slipped the ring on her finger and stood to kiss her, both of them laughing and crying at once. They took engagement photos with their cameras on timers, capturing their joy against the backdrop of the moon that had brought them together. They married 6 months later in a small ceremony at their Catskills cabin, surrounded by close friends and family. Elena wore a simple dress and wildflowers in her hair. Dominic looked at her like she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. They said their vows under the stars, promising to chase moons and dreams together, to build a life of meaning and love and partnership. Maya, serving as maid of honor, cried through the entire ceremony. Dominic's sister, his best woman, kept shooting Elena grateful looks for making her brother human again. The reception was casual and joyful, full of laughter and dancing and terrible toasts. When the moon rose, Elena and Dominic slipped away from the party to photograph it together, a tradition they both knew would continue for the rest of their lives. "Happy?" Dominic asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind as she adjusted her camera. "Impossibly happy," Elena confirmed. I didn't know this kind of happy existed before you." They stood together under the moon, cameras temporarily forgotten, just being present in the moment they'd built together. 2 years into marriage, Elena's photography business had grown beyond anything she'd imagined. She published a book of moon photography that became unexpectedly popular, leading to gallery shows and corporate commissions. She taught workshops across the country, bringing Dominic when his schedule allowed, building a reputation as both an artist and educator. Dominic's company continued to thrive, but he maintained the balance Elena had helped him find. He was successful, yes, but no longer consumed. He made time for life for her, for the small moments that actually mattered. They talked about starting a family, agreeing the timing felt right. Elena got pregnant on their 3rd anniversary, and Dominic was impossibly gentle and protective throughout the pregnancy, attending every appointment and reading every book he could find on parenting. Their daughter was born on a clear October night, entering the world under a full moon that Elena insisted was good luck. They named her Luna, unable to resist the connection to what had brought them together. She had Dominic's dark eyes and Elena's wild spirit, and they both fell completely, irrevocably in love with her. Dominic turned out to be a devoted father, the same intensity he'd once poured into work now directed at being present for every milestone, every moment. He worked from home more, restructured his schedule around bedtimes and feeding times, embraced the chaos of new parenthood with surprising grace. Elena watched him walk the floors at 3 in the morning with Luna, singing off-key lullabies, and felt her heart expand in ways she hadn't known were possible. "You're a natural," she told him one exhausted morning, both of them running on coffee and 2 hours of broken sleep. "I have good motivation," Dominic said, Luna sleeping peacefully against his chest. "Best motivation in the world." When Luna was 6 months old, they bundled her up and took her to the ridge in Colorado, wanting to share their special place with her. She was too young to understand, but they took family photos under the moon, documenting this moment of their joined lives. "Think she'll love photography like her mom?" Dominic asked, holding Luna gently while Elena adjusted camera settings. "Or business like her dad," Elena countered. "Or something completely different. As long as she's happy and kind and brave enough to take chances on love." "Like her mother," Dominic said softly. "Like her father," Elena corrected. "You took the biggest chance, showing up to that workshop and pointing your camera at me instead of the sky. Best decision I ever made." They took their family photo as the moon rose. 3 people bound together by love and choice, and the kind of fortune that comes from being brave enough to reach for happiness when it appears. 2 years later, their son arrived, named Sebastian after Dominic's grandfather. He was calmer than Luna, thoughtful and observant, content to watch the world with serious eyes. Dominic joked that he'd be the steady one while Luna charged ahead, breaking hearts and taking names. Elena juggled motherhood and career with the same determination she brought to everything, teaching online workshops during nap times and shooting on weekends when Dominic could watch the kids. It was exhausting and chaotic and absolutely perfect. Dominic sold his majority stake in Cross Industries when Sebastian was 1, keeping a consulting role but stepping back from active leadership. He wanted more time with his family, wanted to be present for the years that mattered. Money was no longer a concern, and he'd proven everything he needed to prove professionally. Now he wanted to focus on being a husband and father. "No regrets?" Elena asked when the sale was finalized. "None," Dominic said firmly. "I have everything I actually want right here." They bought a bigger house in Westchester, one with land and space for the kids to run wild. Elena set up a proper studio in the barn, teaching workshops on the property during summer months. They kept the cabin in the Catskills for family escapes, introducing Luna and Sebastian to the magic of dark skies and infinite stars. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Dominic surprised Elena with a gallery showing of his favorite photographs of her, the collection he'd been building since that first stormy night on the ridge. The series was called "She Teaches Moon Photography, but She's Better Than Any Moon," and it showed her in all her forms. Laughing, focused, tender with their children, radiant with joy. "You can't just rent a gallery without telling me," Elena protested, though she was crying happy tears as she walked through the space, seeing herself through his eyes. "I can if it's a love letter," Dominic said, wrapping his arms around her waist. "You taught me to capture beauty, remember? This is what I see every time I look at you." The show was a success, with several pieces selling to collectors who recognized the raw emotion in the photographs. But Dominic refused to sell his favorites, the ones that captured the most intimate moments. Those were for him, for them, for their children to someday understand the depth of love their parents shared. Years passed in a blur of soccer games and school plays, family vacations and quiet evenings. Luna grew into a confident, adventurous girl who loved science and soccer. Sebastian developed a passion for music, teaching himself piano with determined focus. Both children grew up understanding that their parents loved each other deeply. That partnership meant supporting dreams and sharing burdens. Elena's career continued to flourish. She published 2 more books, won awards for her moon photography, became a sought-after teacher and speaker. But she never lost sight of what mattered most: the family she and Dominic had built together, the life they'd chosen over and over again. Dominic stayed involved in selective business ventures, consulting and investing in companies he believed in. But he was mostly focused on being present, on showing up for his family in all the ways that counted. He coached Luna's soccer team despite knowing nothing about soccer. He attended every one of Sebastian's recitals, recording them with the camera skills Elena had taught him. On their 10th anniversary, they returned to the Ridge in Colorado, just the two of them, leaving the kids with grandparents for a weekend alone. It was the first time they'd been back without children since Luna was a baby, and the place felt both familiar and transformed by memory. 10 years, Elena said, setting up her tripod in the exact spot where they'd met. Can you believe it? Feels like both forever and no time at all, Dominic replied, setting up his own equipment beside hers. Would you do it again, if you could go back knowing everything that would happen? In a heartbeat, Elena said without hesitation. Every exhausting, beautiful, chaotic moment. I'd do it faster, Dominic said. Wouldn't waste a single day being careful or scared. I'd see you on this ridge and know immediately that you were going to change my life. They shot the moon together as it rose, falling into the comfortable rhythm they'd developed over a decade of practice. But this time, Dominic also turned his camera on Elena, just like he had that first stormy night, capturing her in the silver moonlight with the same wonder and love that had never dimmed. Still more interesting than the moon, he said when she caught him. Still can't believe you'd rather photograph me than the sky, Elena replied. Always, Dominic promised, every single time. They made love later in their cabin, slow and tender and familiar, a decade of intimacy making everything better, deeper, more connected. Afterward, wrapped around each other in the moonlight streaming through the windows, Elena felt overwhelming gratitude for the life they'd built. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For showing up, for taking my class even though you didn't know what you were doing, for seeing me when I felt invisible, for loving me exactly as I am. Dominic kissed her forehead. Thank you for taking a chance on a workaholic billionaire who didn't know how to live. For moving across the country even though it terrified you. For building this life with me. For giving me Luna and Sebastian and every perfect ordinary moment in between. Best $150 you ever spent, Elena teased, echoing their first conversation. Best $150 anyone ever spent, Dominic agreed. Luna graduated high school with honors and a full scholarship to MIT for aerospace engineering. Sebastian followed 3 years later, heading to Juilliard for music composition. Elena and Dominic stood together at each graduation, holding hands and crying, marveling at the humans they'd helped create and shape. We did good, Dominic said at Sebastian's graduation party. We really did, Elena agreed, watching their son play an original composition he'd written as a gift to his parents, a piece that somehow captured love and family in musical form. With the kids grown and launched into their own lives, Elena and Dominic entered a new phase. They traveled more, taking photography expeditions to chase rare lunar events around the world. They spent long weekends at their cabin, rediscovering each other without the chaos of active parenting. They volunteered together, teaching photography to underprivileged kids, using their resources and skills to create opportunities for others. Dominic fully retired at 55, wanting to focus entirely on the things that brought him joy. Elena continued teaching and shooting, but at her own pace, taking only projects that excited her. They'd built enough financial security to live comfortably for several lifetimes, but that had never been the goal anyway. The goal had been this: a life well lived, shared with someone who made everything better. A partnership built on respect and love and the willingness to keep choosing each other every single day. On their 20th anniversary, back at the Ridge one more time, Elena looked at Dominic and saw the years in his face, the silver threading through his hair, the laugh lines around his eyes. He was still the most handsome man she'd ever seen, still looked at her like she was his favorite view. 20 years, she marveled. When did we get old? We're not old, Dominic protested. We're seasoned, experienced, vintage, Elena laughed. Vintage, I like that. They took photos as the moon rose, but spent more time just watching, appreciating the beauty without the need to capture it. They'd taken thousands of moon photos over the years. Tonight was about presence, not documentation. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't taken my class? Elena asked. If you'd chosen painting or pottery like your sister suggested? I'd have found you anyway, Dominic said with certainty. Maybe different place, different time, but I'd have found you. Some things are inevitable. You believe in fate. I believe in us, he corrected. I believe that what we built was worth every risk, every scared moment, every leap of faith. I believe we were lucky enough to recognize something real when we found it and brave enough to protect it. Elena leaned against him, fitting perfectly into his side the way she had for 2 decades. I love you. I love you more. Impossible. Watch me prove it, Dominic said, and kissed her under the moon that had witnessed their entire love story. Years continued to unfold with grace and gratitude. Luna got married and gave them grandchildren. 2 rowdy boys who loved when Grandpa Dominic told stories about building his business, and Grandma Elena taught them to take pictures of the moon. Sebastian found love with a fellow composer, and they created beautiful music together, filling the family with art and joy. Elena and Dominic watched their family grow, their legacy expanding beyond anything they'd imagined. But the core remained the same, the 2 of them choosing each other, building a life of meaning and love. On their 30th anniversary, they sat on the deck of their Catskills cabin, holding hands and watching the moon rise over the trees. Their cameras sat unused beside them. They'd long since stopped needing to capture every moment, content to simply live them. 30 years, Elena said softly, feels like we just met. Best 30 years of my life, Dominic replied. And I can't wait for the next 30. Ambitious, Elena teased, for you, always. The moon climbed higher, bathing them in silver light, bearing witness to a love that had started with a camera pointed at the wrong subject and grown into something beautiful and lasting. A love that proved sometimes the best photographs are the ones you live rather than capture, the moments you hold in your heart rather than your hands. Elena thought back to that first night, standing on the ridge teaching a confident stranger how to see the moon. She'd had no idea she was teaching the man she'd spend her life with, the man who would give her children and grandchildren and decades of partnership and joy. Dominic thought back to that same night, driving to a workshop because his sister insisted he needed a hobby, having no idea he was about to meet the woman who would teach him what it meant to truly live. Thank you, Elena whispered, not for the first time, not for the last. For what? Dominic asked, though he knew. For pointing your camera at me instead of the sky. Best mistake I ever made, Dominic said, pulling her close. Except it wasn't a mistake. You were always more interesting than the moon. They sat together as night deepened and stars emerged. 2 people who'd found each other against impossible odds and built something real and lasting. The moon hung above them, eternal and beautiful, but neither looked up. They were too busy looking at each other, still finding beauty after 3 decades, still discovering new depths of love, still grateful every single day for the gift of having found their person in this vast and complicated world. And in the end, that was the real story. Not about moon photography or business empires or the logistics of building a life. It was about 2 people who saw each other truly, loved each other deeply, and chose each other consistently. That was the magic. That was everything. The moon would continue to rise and set, constant and reliable, marking time for lovers everywhere. But Elena and Dominic had learned the secret. The moon was beautiful, yes, but it was just light and rock and distance. Real beauty was in the person beside you, the hand in yours, the life you built together one day at a time. That was the photograph worth taking. That was the moment worth capturing. That was love.